injecting more uncertainty with tariffs and a lengthy government shutdown. You can read the rest of the story on page 14 of the Washington Post. Also, we do have this story here, turned off by the shutdown in places like Macomb County. Meek working class voters are increasingly frustrated with Trump. You can read all about that. Now it is turning out to be actually the 32nd day, counting today. Of course, that time difference notwithstanding, it should be 33 days since the shutdown. Also, we can see on the front page of the Washington Post, High Coast push police to abandon body cams, and Iraqi tells of helping ISIS make lethal toxins. Scientist sits in prison, but others who aided effort may still be at large. He says in the week after his city fell to the Islamic State, Iraqi scientist Suleiman al-Afarari sat in his deserted government office and waited for the day when the terrorists would show up. The black-clad militants who had seized Mosul in 2014 were making their way through each of its bureaucracies, rounding up workers and managers who had not yet fled the city and pressing them into service. You can read the rest of the story here on page 12. Also, we can take a look at what is happening on the front page of other international dailies. Let me try and lift the Wall Street Journal, I should say. Around the nation, marchers keep focus on King's legacy, eyes on the prize. And we can see here this, well, the people came out in force also to mark the Martin Luther King Day, which was the day before yesterday. And Spy Channel paved way for nuke talks. US and North Korean intelligence officials met for a decade-easing Trump-Kim summit. Also slowing growth tests China. Trade fight amplifies slump in key industries, creating slowest annual expansion since 1990. That is what we have on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Also, JCPenney faces do or die year. JCPenney CEOs sells. Okay, that is JCPenney's company sales are falling. Its stores are stuck in malls, and the turnaround strategy keeps changing. 3 months after the embattled retailer hired a new chief executive, a handful of senior positions remain vacant. You can follow this story inside the Wall Street Journal this morning. I want to show you also what we do have on the front page of the latest, which is The Economist, the mother of all messes. And you can see this crack that is happening right now. Of course, this is a Brexit. How is it portend also? How will it actually portend with the European Union right now? That is a question that everyone is asking. And we can see there is also new realignment in the European Union so far. We'll give you the gritty details of this much later in the course of the program. The long arm of the American law, baiting of China's bad debts, Chickenomics lacking profitable, also restraining killer robots. This is the latest of The Economist, the 19th to 25th January. I want to see if I can try quickly to cuddle the Business Daily so that we can see what it is holding for us. But in the meantime, we can actually be looking also at some of the editorial cartoons that we have today. Let's begin with Stano, what he has drawn for us. This is what Stano has drawn for us, right? Cabinet, this is Matiang'i, and actually you can see on the pylon there he's writing a handful of duties, right? Cabinet, fasten your seatbelt, and the challenges I had as well with the new roles, that is implementing the Big Four agenda. And of course this has drawn a lot of debate right now as far as this position is concerned, and why Matiang'i is being, of course, given more roles. This is what Stano has drawn inside the People Daily. I just want to show you also what we do have inside, not really this, inside the Daily Nation. What Munene has drawn for us is all about the county funds. You can find it on page 14 of the Daily Nation today, right? I can't read all this because of interest of time, but of course you can grab a copy of the Daily Nation and you can see the posy of goons, of course, surrounding the county funds. And this has been shown largely by the Auditor General, how this expenditure of the funds is in the counties. Also, in the Standard, Gado has drawn this for us. This is the alligator that is Emerson Mnangagwa, the president of Zimbabwe. And of course, right now, Zimbabwe people are protesting. We'll give you the details of this. Also, the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission have come up with the reports about police brutality and torture, which the government is stoutly denying. But also, we shall look at this with our panelists much later in the course of the program. Those are your editorial cartoons. Let me see if I'm leaving anything out so that I can actually show you what is on there. We have the Chicago Tribune, if you want to also grab a copy of that and look at it. 24 million settlements on county agenda. Really the biggest miracle is that after everything she's been through, she's still pal. This is a heart-wrenching story of people praying for a miracle. This is Priscilla Langs sitting with her daughter Opal at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago on Thursday. She celebrated her second birthday this month. They're eagerly waiting for a miracle. Of course, she'll be going through a heart transplant. That is what we have also on the front page of the Chicago Tribune. I want to show you also lastly what we do have on the front page of the Business Daily. Allow me just to show you what we do have with a hard copy, because now the soft copy is acting up this morning. But this is what is on the front page of the Business Daily this morning. Treasury headcount to catch ghost pensioners. That is what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. Count, which starts next month, intended to weed out fake retirees collecting benefits. It says the Treasury is next month expected to roll out a headcount of retired civil servants in a census intended to weed out thousands of ghost pensioners that could be siphoning millions of shillings monthly. The headcount will require all 300,000 retirees on the government payrolls to present themselves at Huduma centers countrywide. It is intended to curb the government's ballooning pension bill that is expected to surpass the 100 billion shillings mark next year. And this story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily. Also, Matiang'i Rotich land powerful post in New World. There's a cyber story there. Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i and his Treasury counterpart Henry Rotich secured expanded powers in a new government structure announced by President Uhuru Kenyatta, technically elevating them to the status of super ministers. This story tucked away on page 4 of the Business Daily as well. And collapse deacons is 1.9 billion shillings underwater. Troubled fashion and clothing retailer Deacons East Africa is up to 1.9 billion shillings underwater. Administrators of the collapse firm have disclosed. You can read the rest of the details on page 4 of the Business Daily. And tax cheats face imports freeze is another story there. Individuals and firms that fail to file domestic tax returns may be locked out of import and export business from April. The taxman has said in a fresh bid to boost compliance. And Jamii Bora on the spot over interest rules. A court has directed Jamii Bora Bank to comply with banking guidelines in calculating interest of a loan it advanced to a regional vehicle leasing company in May 2015. Also, banks rally ahead of dividends pay. Bank stocks have been on an upward trend at the Nairobi Securities Exchange this year on higher investor demand driven by cheaper valuation and an eye on dividend yields ahead of full year reporting. You have this story continuing on page 19 of the Business Dailies. Also, I'll be remiss if I don't mention this particular picture that we see here. Heroes send off. This is what is on the front page of the Business Daily. And these are mourners at a memorial service yesterday for the 6 employees of tech firms Cellulant who were killed during last week's terrorist attack at 14 Riverside. The service was held at Christ is the Answer Ministry, that is Sitam, and you can see also related story there on page 5 of the Business Daily this morning. Right, those are your dailies. Make sure you grab a copy of them. This is the Daily Nation for you. Matiang'i's new role deals blow to Rotich. Make sure you grab a copy of this, and we shall be discussing this with our panelists also as well, and a raft of other issues much later in the course of the program. But for now, the highlights. Unofficial Prime Minister? What does this mean for Deputy President William Ruto? EU signal support for, but not a claim for Congo President-elect. And we have the human rights accusing security forces of systemic torture. Dr. Fred Okongo Matiang'i is officially the most powerful cabinet secretary in Kenya. So much so that the question begs, is he the unofficial prime minister? President Uhuru Kenyatta has issued an executive order that fully makes the Interior Cabinet Secretary the chair of the Cabinet Committee in charge of the implementation and communication of the national government development programs. The President has also transferred the National Transport and Safety Authority to the Interior Ministry. This, however, raises eyebrows on where this leaves Deputy President William Ruto, who has consistently maintained that he is the one to ensure the implementation of state projects. Vincent Odor starts us off.
President Uhuru Kenyatta has issued executive orders which strengthen the role of the Cabinet Secretary of Interior and Coordination of National Government, currently held by Fred Matiang'i. These include in running of key functions of the national government, making him the most powerful Cabinet Secretary. The President has established the National Development Implementation and Communication Cabinet Committee that will be chaired by Interior CS Matiang'i, who will be deputized by Treasury CS Henry Rotich. The Interior CS reports straight to the President. The committee that CS Matiang'i now chairs is made up of all Cabinet Secretaries, the Attorney General, and the Head of Public Service. The executive order has also established the National Development Implementation Technical Committee that will be chaired by Interior Principal Secretary, who will be deputized by Treasury Principal Secretary, with other members being all the other Principal Secretaries. With the new elevation, CS Matiang'i will be the Chief Supervisor of all national government programs and projects. Matiang'i will also be the one to receive and deliberate on reports from the National Development Implementation Technical Committee before reporting to the President. He will also be the one coordinating strategic communication to the public and other stakeholders on the progress of national government programs and projects. And this is not all. The President has also transferred the management and coordination of the National Transport and Safety Authority from the Ministry of Transport to the Ministry of Interior. This new move has further strengthened Matiang'i's role and power in the running of the national government, a move that is likely to reduce the roles played and claimed by Deputy President, which DP William Ruto has jealously defended in the past.
Na wale watu wanasumbuka na mimi wanasema ya kwamba mbona Ruto anaenda hapa na kwenda pale. Mimi nataka niwaambie, mimi ni naibu rais wa Kenya na nimepatiwa kazi na wananchi wa taifa la Kenya, na hiyo kazi nitafanya kwa bidii, na sitaomba ruhusa ati mtu ya upinzani ati niombe ruhusa ati niende nifanye kazi wananchi wa Kenya wamenipatia.
For a while now, Ruto has argued that he is the only one constitutionally mandated to assist the President in his functions, including the implementation of government projects. These have been at the heart of the DP's development trips across the country, which have many times been criticized as being campaign rounds.
Mulisikia kuna mwingine pale Kasarani ambaye aliapishwa kwamba atasaidia Uhuru Kenyatta. Si hao watu wengine tu ni kujaribu na kudoea. Lakini mtu mwenye hako na kazi ambaye amepatiwa na katiba ya Kenya ni mimi. Kwa hivyo wale watu wanasumbuka na ile kazi wanafanya, waende wasome katiba. Katiba inasema Deputy President ndio mtu ya mkono ya rais. Na kazi ya mtu ya mkono ya rais ni kuhakikisha kwamba barabara inajengwa, sitima inaunganishwa, wananchi wanaelewa mpango ya serikali na dunia inasonga mbele.
The executive orders appear to sideline DP Ruto in the composition of the National Development Implementation and Communication Cabinet Committee. The notice does not include him as a member or an authority to receive a report from the chair. The President has also established 8 Regional Development Implementation Coordination Committees and 47 County Development Implementation Coordination Committees. CS Matiang'i now becomes the official spokesperson of the national development programs and the one in charge of the implementation of the projects, besides strengthening the presidency. Vincent Odur, NTV.
Well, allow me to introduce our panelists who are already in studio with us to also weigh in on this particular new development. Is Matiang'i now juggling a lot of frogs, right? His hands full as far as duties are concerned. With the latest from the president, we have with us this morning, I mentioned to you earlier at the top of the hour, I introduced to you, this is Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, who is here with us this morning. He's a conflict and resolution and national security expert. We do have with us as well Ambassador Erastus Muncher, who is the chairman of African Capacity Building Foundation and a former chair of the African Union, also the chair of Trademark East Africa. We do have with us as well, this is Dr. Tuishan Murhula, who is a lecturer at the Institute of Peace Studies and International Relations, that is the Kima Institute of Peace Studies and International Relations. We do have with us as well Dr. Hassan Khanenje, also I mentioned him earlier at the top of the hour, who is the director of the Horn Institute. And we have Professor Noah Midamba, who is the Vice Chancellor of KC University and an expert on foreign policy and diplomacy. Gentlemen, good morning again.
Good morning.
Fantastic. Let's just begin with Dr. Mustafa on this particular new development, and we can see the headlines. If we may just look at them, this is what the headline on the Daily Nation is all about. And people are actually juxtaposing this particular new appointment, or new roles, I should say, with a blow to Ruto. So they're trying to fraternize this with Ruto's also position as well. So have they trimmed more of the powers from Ruto and given that to Matiang'i? This is what now the Daily Nation is saying. Huge portfolio gives Interior Cabinet Secretary powers over security, administration, implementation of government projects, and a fight against corruption, denying DP the opportunity to launch public projects and claim credit for development in 2022, jostling. And let's see also how the Standard also put this. Questions as Matiang'i gets more powers. Executive order, this is the first one this year. President Kenyatta gives Interior CS an expanded mandate to supervise development programs, and you have all those new roles also enumerated here. And the Star gave this particular twist. Uhuru trims Ruto's power in new order, right? Matiang'i named de facto chief minister in charge of key projects. President issues new executive order putting Interior CS in charge of Big Four NTSA, and it continues on page 2. And this is how also the People Daily splashed today. Uhuru makes CS Matiang'i chief minister, in quotes there. What do you think, Dr. Mustafa?
Yeah, Debarl, I must admit that when I read the executive order yesterday,
yes,
I didn't think about it in terms of the power dynamics, the succession debate, until this morning when I read on the Nation headline. What I saw and thought about last night was here is a president that wants to instill discipline in the country. You have some of the cabinet secretaries coming up with pronouncements that not in line with the wishes of President Uhuru Kenyatta. You have some politicians that have been running around and actually waving the flag of development and claiming it to their own credit, of course including the deputy president. When Kenyans elected President Uhuru Kenyatta, they gave him a mandate to develop this country and to secure this country. And that is exactly now what Uhuru Kenyatta is doing, is to call his troops to order and to instill discipline. And to do so, he needs a disciplinarian that will not claim political credit for the work that the president is leading. Of course, in the absence of the president,
yes,
Ruto deputizes the president. So when the president is not there in the monthly meetings or requires, when he's not there to receive a brief, Matiang'i is going to brief the deputy president, Ruto. But what this does really, Debarl, is to stop this nonsense of politicians claiming credit for development that taxpayers are paying for, that they should not be claiming.
All right, I know, of course, every Wednesday we are very apolitical, but of course, if the splashes is also taking a political angle, we must just weigh in on this. But can we give it also a security twist to it? Because looking at what is happening right now, first of all, we have the president stopping all the projects, being launched in the country for a while. Then it takes a span of a long time until now. Then we have Matiang'i taking over, because initially we had Deputy President William Ruto, who was actually gallivanting all about all over the country, trying to launch this particular project. So people are seeing, of course, they're looking at it very keenly, and they're seeing there's a sort of a political, shifting that is, or dynamics playing out on this, as far as the relationship between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto is concerned. And a lot has been leading up to this, looking at also the breach or the breaking of portfolios when it comes to forums in public officials or public engagements. We can see also that has been breached before. I don't know what, Ambassador.
Just an additional point, Debarl, and this is a trend. You see quite a number of key departments, including NTSA, that has now been taken to the Ministry of Interior. If you look at key appointments, you actually see security men or managers taking up these positions, from the Directorate of Public Prosecutions, the Office of the DPP, Immigration, the Director of Immigration, EACC, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. You see that it's being staffed by people who have a background in security. And so giving Matiang'i, who basically leads the Ministry of Interior, giving him extra duties and responsibility, just confirms this trend that Uhuru is very serious, wants more discipline, and wants to secure this country.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from Ambassador Erastus Muncha.
Well, once again, good morning, Debarl, and may I use this occasion to wish you a happy 2019. I hope it's not too late to do that, but also with my fellow panelists and our technical team.
It's not too late if you're seeing each other for the first time.
Exactly.
Yeah, yes.
Exactly. Well, first of all, I don't want to read too much politics aspect of it into this move. I look at it, the timing of it. First of all, coming early in the year, and the manner in which it communicated, it tells you that the president, having been in Mombasa, he has also been reflecting on the performance of his administration in the year 2018, but also is looking at the year ahead, and obviously has looked at the shortcomings of that performance, and is trying to close those gaps. And my take of this is that if you look at even the time preceding this announcement or this executive order, the president has been visibly quite angry with his ministers, particularly on their performance. And there's no doubt about that. And therefore, he probably has seen that there is a gap in terms of the management, and therefore is closing that gap. But then, the one word then I would perhaps want to advise here to the executive is the aspect where we, put our eyes off the ball. If you look back to Kibaki administration, he had introduced something which is called performance contract.
Yes.
And that, unfortunately, was dropped. And I would have advised, perhaps even to Matiang'i, that if he now assumes this role, this is one aspect that should be reinstated so that you can improve performance. The rest, I want to agree with my guru here, that yes, the president is also trying to make sure that he is fully in charge, and that the House, because you remember even before that, he's been telling people, stop this talk about succession, stop this success, people claiming credit and all that, but he really wants to be in charge and make sure that he delivers, and he wants his team to be focused so that they can deliver for his election, campaign promises.
Right, thank you. Let's say from Dr. Kanenje.
Personally, I didn't actually read too much into the politics of it, and I honestly believe it's not targeting, the deputy president. But a lot of times, when your toddlers run wild in the house, there is need to restore some order. And I think the president has realized, and of course we've been watching him, he is keen to leave a legacy, to actually make a difference, especially in his final term. Now, irrespective of how, and some people may be uncomfortable, especially with CS Matiang'i's abrasive nature sometimes, there is no denying he's been a workhorse in this administration. We saw what he did in education. We see what he's doing right now. And anyone, and the president being, you know, a smart person, knows that for us to get to where we are going, perhaps we need a workhorse and someone who is actually committed to bringing results, not just the rhetorics. If you've lived in this country long enough, we also know that sometimes we've had cabinet secretaries who do not even know what is going on in the ministry. Okay. And yet, that sometimes is the area of competence, but they say they do not know. Now, when you find someone like C.S. Matiang'i, who is hands-on, and he's everywhere all the time, it is something that inspires confidence that he can perhaps actually do even more. Now, as they say, that to whom much is given, much is expected. There's plenty that we expect from C.S. Matiang'i, and in part because of his competence and what he has demonstrated from the time he was appointed as CS for Education. So I think it has less to do with politics and more to do with the delivery. All right.
Also, let's hear from Dr. Touche. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me this morning. To be honest about this issue, I think my expertise is not enough to make a very meaningful contribution, so I may just pass.
You may pass it?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from Professor Noah Midamba.
Debarl, good morning. Welcome back on the show.
Thank you.
I concur, Debarl, with my colleagues here. And, you know, Kenya should not read too much politics in this. The Kenya people voted for a new constitution, such that we have professional people as cabinet secretary instead of politicians. And, you know, I'm very disappointed when some of the people going around cabinet secretary making pronouncements as if they're politicians. And I think the time has come for the head of state to say enough is enough. If you want to be a politician, go back and campaign and be elected. But I'm going to have people that are going to deliver. And if Fred Matiang'i has proved that can deliver, yes, it is important to acknowledge that and respect that as Kenyan. But one of the things that I am keenly watching is that we keep our eye on national security, and that we do not dilute national security with putting too much other responsibility, such that we are not able to focus on what we need.
All right. Dr. Mustafa, your final remarks on this?
Yeah, well, on what Professor Midamba said, you may give Matiang'i a lot of work, and it's clear that he's been given a lot of responsibilities because he's a doer and is a workhorse, as Dr. Kanenje said. It's important to also watch that we do not dilute, to quote Professor Midamba, the whole issue of national security, that he might be so much focused on now not exactly supervising the other ministries, but checking and ensuring that actually everybody is delivering to a point where he actually loses some aspects of supervision and ensuring that this country is secure. I don't think that is going to happen because I'm sure he has managers, security managers that are doing their work, but he needs to have the focus right there in the Ministry of Interior. Right.
Thank you. Now, the government is in the process of compiling all information relevant about Kenyans and foreigners residing in the country with the purpose of generating a unique number that will identify each individual. Announcing this, President Uhuru Kenyatta said the registration system will be the authentic single source of truth on personal identity for everybody in the country.
By the integrated population registration system, my administration will complete a central master population database, which will be the authentic single source of truth on personal identity in Kenya. And this database will contain information on all Kenyan citizens, as well as foreign nationals residing in our republic. For each registration, the National Integrated Identity Management System, better referred to as NIMS, will generate a unique identification number that will be known as the Huduma number. You will have noticed, I'm sure, the seamlessness with which the security agencies responded to the terrorist attacks last week. We seek this year to achieve the very same level of coordination and synergy between all national government departments. This directive is meant to increase efficiency, speed of delivery, better utilization of public resources, and reduce wastage as well as gatekeeping.
So will that really move the needle a jot in terms of security in this country when we actually get all these details biometrically of every individual in the country, and you have that particular Huduma number as an individual? Excuse me, some flames in the morning. But let's just get to hear from Dr. Hassan Khanenja on this. Do you think in terms of security this will be up to scratch?
I think it's one of the many things. Of course, in advanced countries and democracies, virtually your ID or the US social security number has everything. Someone doesn't need to go far. Mm-hmm. Now, the challenge for us, though, is we still need to clean up our system. Because part of the challenge is we have individuals who, right today as we speak, they have Kenyan passports and Kenyan IDs, yes, who actually shouldn't be having them. Mm-hmm. And so if we can do DNA, of course, it's going to be an extensive process. First of all, we need to build capacity, yes, to be able to do that. It takes quite a few resources. Now, it's possible. Not all countries have DNA for everybody. In fact, most countries, if only you go through a certain process, can they actually collect DNA from you. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are certain legal requirements that have to be made for you to do that. Now, while this is a step in the right direction, we really need to work on, first of all, fixing our system that we have right now, mm-hmm, because I think we can be able to achieve a lot. We have individuals who are roaming wild. We have sometimes people who are supposed to be serving Kenyans and they're being paid by taxpayers, but who are compromising themselves. And we've talked on this show that corruption is a national security issue. Yes. Now, unless we actually tackle that, chances are we're still going to allow in bad elements, we're still going to entertain bad elements, such that a cracked window screen may allow me, or rather may make a police officer stop me and perhaps keep me for 9 hours, but perhaps carry an AK-47 500 shillings will not actually, may allow me to pass. And so we really need to address that, because if we don't, it's going to be a challenge no matter what systems we put in place. Rasas Muncha, this has been a very ticklish issue also in the UK as far as biometrics is concerned, having also registration using the DNA. Do you think also that would spark the same debate here? Yeah, don't forget that the UK, for the greater part of its existence, has not had a written constitution nor IDs as such. But because of the new order in which we live now, that has become necessary. But now addressing the earlier question. Does the Magna Carta really capture? Does it, exactly. It doesn't really capture? Exactly. But addressing this question of registration, I think that's where the world is going, particularly using now the new technology of digitization, so that you are able to have the data of all your citizens. But I wouldn't want to just link it only to security. I think that's the mistake we've made. Even when you look at the gaps of our security, mm-hmm, it has always been state-centric, that the state feeling that they can provide and take care of security itself, with little participation of the society, of the citizens. And to me, this is where the gaps are. In addition to having that, and in most cases, perhaps just talking about that registration itself, mm-hmm, it's important that now you have one number which is linked to your ID, your driving license, to your bank accounts, and everything. It's easier than, I'm sure this would engender a lot of debate from all quarters, but it is the way we are going. And the data that you generate can help you do many things, whether it's education, health, agriculture, whatever, security. Mm-hmm. And so we shouldn't just link it to just security. It should be much more. And that's where our Nyumba Kumi has failed.
because Nyumba Kumi shouldn't have just been looked at as a security issue. Nyumba Kumi, if you see where it works well in countries like Switzerland or Ethiopia, where I lived for some time, you have a whole host of components that go with it. And so as we address our security issue, let us not just focus on what the state can do, but also let's embrace the larger population so that it's owned and there is participation.
All right. Professor Nomi Damba.
Debarl, I agree with the Ambassador Mwenja. People should not jump or inject politics into this thing. It is very important. We live in a very complex world where anything happens. We need to document exactly how many people live by each region. We need to document who is authentic, who need to vote in Kenya. We need to, in terms of healthcare, we need to know how many people we are serving. Are they legitimate people? And so these are the necessary things that any developing or developed society decide to do. Right now, Debarl, there is a really big question as to who is voting and how many people voted. And every year, every time, this is a persistent question. So once and for all, let's develop a fairly comprehensive database the way the German people did, so we can move ahead.
All right. Okay, let's hear from Dr. Tusey.
Well, I agree actually with what has been said so far, but I think one of the key issues also that people need to take into consideration should be to look at the trade-offs between privacy and security.
Yes.
In any modern state, you know, it is really important that you manage the population for the sake of security in the cities or the countries. But at the same time, and I know that this is a fight that, really characterizes the US society, how much data, information about my life or myself am I willing to just give away to the government for that sake? If it is the reason of controlling, say, security, sometimes the government can have all the data, but it does not prevent those with evil intentions to perpetrate whatever they want to do within the country. And I believe actually, as we were reflecting on the last act of terrorism, last week,
yes,
we began to see a new face that is emerging. Terrorism is not necessarily, imported from outside. It can be homegrown at some extent. And this, of course, can say, yeah, we have the data, we have the information about, the people here, but we cannot go and preclude them when they have this intention from committing whatever they want to do. So that's another just issue I wanted to weigh in terms of thinking.
All right. Okay, I just wanted to take us back. Okay, I can see Dr. Mustafa was stringing the list to say something.
Debarl, I think it's important to underline and emphasize that having a national DNA data bank is critically important in fighting crime. Now, in countries like the United Kingdom, 60% of all prosecutions, charges are actually secured on account of matching DNA samples that are collected in the crime scene and matched to the suspects or to the national DNA data bank that is there in the United Kingdom. The second point here that we need to emphasize here is that when we are talking about DNA data bank, the DNA data bank that is used for security purposes is different from the DNA data bank that the medical research companies have. In security organizations like the DNA data bank that is there in the United Kingdom, they don't keep the full genomic sequence of the DNA. They only look at certain aspects for identification purposes, and that is coded. Of course, there are ethical, legal issues here that the country will have to address, and therefore calling for a very clear forensics genetic policy in the country. That has to come first. The only country in the world that has a DNA data bank for all their citizens and residents is Kuwait. No other country has that. United Kingdom by 2015 had only 6.1 million of those who are living in the United Kingdom had their the DNA data bank in its national data bank, or rather DNA data bank. So this is going to be an uphill task. It is critically important, but what I think the country should focus on is to keep the DNA data bank for the offenders, those who have been arrested. In UK, that's what happens. They actually keep the DNA of those that have offended, do the investigations. Now, if they are taken through the court process and then they are acquitted, the DNA information is deleted after some time.
All right, thank you. All right, let's just move on, and also we take a look at what really happened yesterday, where the fallen employees of technology firm Cellulant have been held for their bravery in the face of a terrorist attack last Tuesday. The 6 are believed to have died trying to fight the terrorists who attacked them as they sought refuge in their offices. The gentlemen were honored in a joint memorial service.
We trusted Ash to selflessly lead the team like he did on that fateful day, where he kept advising and giving options, as a tactful person he was.
If there was ever a pure heart, and an assuming heart, a loving heart, a caring heart, a giving heart, a really friendly person.
Remember the dark jokes and your delightful sense of humor. Chief would say, I have a joke about construction. I'm still working on it. You always found a way to cheer us up somehow through it all. You were a friend, even though you were our brother. Your unconditional love and kind heart inspired us to be better versions of ourselves. You gave more than you received, and there is too much pain now.
Actually, Professor Naomi Damba just lives adjacent to the seat complex, and of course that particular day was a nightmare for him going home. Professor Naomi Damba, that's why we missed you last Wednesday.
Well, Debarl, not only that I live next to the complex, but I was actually supposed to have a meeting there at 4 o'clock.
At 4 o'clock?
Yes, and I end up at chemist store in Westland when it happened, and it was my daughter from the US who first called me frantically to find where I am and to notify me that this was going on.
So thank God at least you went to the chemist that day.
That's correct.
Well, you were having a running stomach. You know, sometimes things happen, you never know.
Don't
leads you.
Don't get too much in detail. On the air, we don't do that. But I just want to say this, Debarl. I reflect a lot on this issue. And I listen to both my friends, the community we have at the university. People are hungry, and they have the right to be hungry. But what I want to say to Kenyans is I reflected on what Sun Tzu, the Chinese general, said, which is know your enemy. To know your enemy, you must become your enemy. And basically, what I'm trying to say is that the Muslim people are not your enemy, and the Somali people are not your enemy. We're fighting a different enemy, and that enemy can be your daughter, it can be your sister, it can be your brother, it can be your friend. And so Kenya people have to have the ability to sift and carefully select and know who is the enemy. And this, we live in a different time. We cannot afford to relax. The people in Israel are not relaxed. They don't trust anybody who will pass. And that's the stage where we need to be. And we need to be in that stage for a while, because over 450 people have died since 1998. We have had 4 major attacks in Kenya, when Uganda has been attacked only once and Ethiopia has not been attacked. So there is a reason why we are being attacked, and we have to turn it around.
Right. Let's hear from Erastus Mwencha.
Yeah, to weigh in on this matter, first of all, I think one needs to appreciate the response by the public and the state when this happened. And I know of many friends, even family members who ought to have been there, or some of them who are there, but who ended up being rescued. And I think we thank God that the limitation, particularly on the human loss, was minimized because of that swift response. Having said that, I think this links very well with our earlier discussion, and there was, my fellow panelists alluding to the fact that we now live in an era that we need to look at how we are managing our security. And I think if you look at the 3 aspects of security, prevention or deterrence, how you respond and manage a crisis when it comes, and the post, I think we are doing well in terms of the second aspect, how you are managing the crisis, and also the post. We still need to improve on that aspect, particularly on the human rights, legal, and all this prosecution. But coming to the prevention, I think this is an area that we really need to look at again very seriously, particularly where the gaps are. When Professor here says, who your enemies, look at who's killing us. It is our kids. It is our family members. And where are they being recruited from? In places of university. Where are these being recruited? Youth. What are the predisposing factors for these youth to be there? You can almost go down and pin it to whether it's corruption or unemployment or disaffection, whatever it is. So the society must reflect on this, and for us to put on guards, because we live in dangerous times, and it can't be business as usual. An attack comes, a knee-jerk reaction, then we move on. Let us go back and reconstruct this model of security.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I think, yes, we've had Erastus Mwencha and also Professor Naomi Damba, who were not here last week. We had also the opinions of the other panelists, that is Dr. Hassan Kulenje, Dr. Hussein, and Mustafa Yusuf Ali. We want to take a short break right now. When we circle back, we see what also is happening internationally. And of course, we can also just take a break with this quote by G.K. Chesterton, who said that, you know, the true soldiers fight not because the true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him. That is what he says there. And quite a good quote there from G.K. Chesterton. We take a short break right now. When we come back, of course, we continue with our discussion here. And you can head over to our Twitter handle. LiveNTV is our Twitter handle. LiveNTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20686 is our SMS portal as well. So don't go away. Much more on the other side of a break. European and African leaders have said they will work with Democratic Republic of Congo following Felix Tshisekedi's heavily disputed presidential. The interest of Britain and the US and the Belgians as well. So all these forces and the Soviet Union as well is actually putting this country in this particular vortex where it is the mire as far as political landscape is concerned. Let's just begin from there. Then we discuss, will Tshisekedi make any discernible difference? And people are saying he's just a puppeteer of Joseph Kabila.
That's a very good place to start, I think. As the election took place in the Congo, I think I was teaching my class, and one of my students brought the very same question to me,
yes,
and asking about why all this fuss about the Congo in the international community,
yes,
why the Congo of all the places. Things are happening in Burundi, in Central African Republic, in so many other countries in Africa, but we don't see that much focus from the international community. Why the Congo? If I have to begin, I wouldn't begin even with the Congolese independence and Patrice Emery Lumumba.
Yes.
I think I would even go back to the moment that Africa was becoming, a petition to become colonies of Western Europe. You will remember that superpowers of the moment met in Berlin and decided on who is getting what and why. But the Congo situation became already a very, thorny issue because no superpower in Europe was allowed to get the Congo. It was too much strategic for them to say we can lose it either to Great Britain or to France or to any other, colonial power of the moment, Germany and so on and so forth. Why that? Because Congo has so much to offer in terms of natural resources, strategic resources that all these colonial powers were fighting for. So from there, it should be noted that the Congo became not really a colony of Belgium. It became a property of King Leopold. And even saying a property of King Leopold is too much, I think I'm saying a little too much here, because King Leopold was given really the custody of the Congo while the Congo was to remain a no man's land. It was just, an international zone where every superpower could come, trade, or conduct business without paying any tax. It is through the development of history that King Leopold was able maybe to appropriate the Congo as a personal property, and eventually he conducted his business in a most cruel way that the many Congolese who died, lost their limbs. The international community came again to force him to step down. The Congo became a colony or under the custody of Belgium in 1908. until 1960 when the Congo became independent. It's the Belgian government that was managing the affairs of the Congolese colony. So when Lumumba comes into the picture, he was the first democratically elected prime minister of the Congo. You will remember that the day of the independence of the Congo, Lumumba was just unhappy about the kind of representation the King of Belgium had given to the Congo and the subservient way in which the incoming president was able to accept that rhetoric. So Lumumba, out of anger, I will say, or maybe just to get things right, he stood up and gave an impromptu speech in which he was trying to set the record right. And he was reminding the international community of the human consciousness that colonization in the Congo was not colonization like everywhere else, where violence really defined the rule of the game. And Lumumba was planning with his big ideas as a Pan-Africanist about how can the Congolese people now rise to the moment and begin to live a life of dignity, human dignity, a life of human rights, which were denied under the colonial rule. But for whatever boldness Lumumba showed on the day of independence and the kind of humiliation he put the King of Belgium into, the plot just started to say we got to get rid of this. Remember also that Lumumba was not the only African leaders of that caliber who was assassinated during those years. Many Africanists, those who believed that independence ought to be not only political but also economic and all the other dimensions, all of them disappeared one by one, from Lumumba to Nkrumah to Cabral to you name it. To skip, just for the sake of time, is to look at the president who ruled the Congo, which became Zaire in the early 70s, President Mobutu. He was a very strong leader. Those years, actually, dictatorship was somehow accepted, for the sake of national unity, state construction and building, and so on and so forth. And Mobutu stayed in Zaire as the head of the state for 32 years until the 90s, late 90s. He died in 1997, 98 rather, but he was ousted from power in 1997 by a coalition formed by Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and rebels from within the Congo. And this is what brought Kabila further in power. But Kabila further even taking power, that should be said, it was not planned by the rebel group. They were having different plans, which Kabila further was able to surprise to some extent and auto-proclaimed himself president of the Congo. So when he got assassinated in 2001, to create a consensus or to create a kind of compromise, his son was sworn in. Between 2001 and 2005, the Congo was trying to reconcile all the different, fighting or warring parties. Then the Congo issued a constitution in 2005. In 2006, the first elections took place, and Kabila's son got re-elected. But the constitution of 2005 allows the president to only hold 2 terms in office. So the first term of Kabila ended in 2011. He got re-elected in 2011, and his second term ended in 2016. But the Congo was unable to organize the elections in 2016 for reasons that the commission said were logistical, whether money or the just security across the country being big, or the infrastructures, roads, and so on and so forth. So many reasons prevented the government from organizing elections in 2016. But the population had grown, and this, I think, is where I would like maybe to invite my colleagues to, weigh in. Between 1991, when the Cold War was ending, I think the path toward democracy has been a rough one. The people have been really fighting to reclaim the rights that were denied to them during the dictatorial period. In 2015, the Congolese population were there to force the government to organize these elections. Eventually, 2 years later, or maybe 3 years later, we got the elections. And this is why I like to tell people that really holding the elections alone in the Congo has been a big victory for the Congolese people. Just for the sake of it, like elections, it's a big victory.
All right, let's hear from,
we'll leave it there.
Thank you. Let's hear from Dr. Hassan Kanenje.
You know, it's interesting. This would have been the first peaceful democratic
story of a country that has over 34 billion US dollars, a trillion US dollars of worth of minerals underneath its belly. Now, when we say that Europe, underdeveloped, and contributed to the terrorizing of some of these countries, Congo is one of those countries that we have to. And we got to call some of these countries, we got to call them out to help, to come back and help these countries, because I don't think Congo will be in a position to come out of the mess that the Belgians and other Western colonizers actually have put the country in.
Ambassador Erastus Poncha.
Just to build on that excellent expose by our brother Toussaint, who himself is Congolese.
Yes, definitely.
And also Hassan and Mustafa. I think we are now in a very difficult situation in the Congo itself. First of all, it's not only the mineral wealth that it has, underground wealth, but also the size of that country. You know, Congo itself is equal to all the Western European countries put together. You combine the geographical territories, it is equal to the size of Congo.
Yes.
And one of the things that Mobutu did was to make sure, at the behest of the Western powers, is that the country did not develop infrastructure. In fact, Mobutu was first to anything called infrastructure, because he wanted to rule this territory that would not be reached by anybody, civilized by anybody, so that he could be a king based in Kinshasa. But here we are. We have just held an election that is disputed, and we can see the reaction of international community, plus internal observers at variance with each other. As one who has also been head of AU delegation at one stage to election, for instance, in Liberia, which was also quite contentious. We are facing a very difficult situation for the future of that country, because, you know, even after assassination of Lumumba, the UN came in. In fact, that's where Secretary General of the UN, Dag Hammarskjöld, was killed because of the crisis in Congo. And soon after that, the UN then put a force there. And that force has been there for over 60 years, and they contributed very little, but having earned billions of dollars. And so the Congo is in a very difficult situation at the moment. And moving forward, I think, as it has been said, first, Tshisekedi must now go for a broad government. There's nothing you can do because the Supreme Court has ruled. There is a good support from SADC. International community will be lukewarm, perhaps to look at how he's approaching this new responsibility. If he indeed tries to have a broad-based government, Fayulu accepts, then he might move forward. If not, it is already a country in crisis, and this is going to intensify that crisis. So really, the countries that are neighbors, I mean, as has been said, Rwanda, Uganda, Zambia, Angola, who have been really working with Congo all this time, should also then see how they can help that country, because peace in Congo, don't even forget that Congo has got 11 countries that neighbor it, and any insecurity in it affects those 11 countries. Congo actually is the heart of the continent, and any crisis there is going to swallow us all.
All right, and you as a former deputy chair of the AU has expressed last week that serious doubts, they have expressed, you know, their reservation, and they have serious doubts about the credibility of the official results. So what does it portend if a body like AU is not really also acknowledging and endorsing this particular win for Tshisekedi?
The technology and the management of election observation is changing quite a bit. Now when you go into an election observation, there is a tendency for all the electoral observers to come together and try to convey, you know, same message for the sake of the country and not to tear it apart. And quite clearly you would see, whereas some observers were silent, some were quite vocal, including the Catholic Church and AU, who saw that the conditions that existed before the election, because an election is not just the election day, you look at what was there before the election day, and you could see things were not going well, especially some regions not being allowed to vote. Okay, then the election, went ahead and took place. And you could see that even the collation process, the announcing process, there was something that's not right. And AU then saw that this country is going to be split, called for reflection on this matter before announcing. But I think in the wisdom of the powers that be in Congo, they went ahead, submitted to the court announced. There is not much you can change now. The AU has now to change its tactics to make sure that you minimize the conflict, not exacerbate the condition. And that's what the AU has done. AU has withdrawn its mission that was going to go there to try and a political settlement rather than a legal settlement. And beyond that, then see how you can build a country together. Now that you are in this situation, it is now for Tshisekedi to walk the country out of this crisis.
So the AU and the EU have taken note of what the Constitutional Court has actually done, but they've not explicitly recognized Tshisekedi as the winner.
I think they are eventually recognized.
Yes.
All right. Let's hear from Professor Nomidamba.
Debarl, the history of this country, as our friend clearly enumerated, is the sad case of the continent of Africa. And but my point is, there is no, I have not seen a perfect election in Africa. And we're probably not going to see one very soon. But obviously we have to work toward perfection with what we have. This election is not perfect by any means, if you are going to look at the Jeffersonian democracy. The point is that this man received 38%. The point is that election actually took place. The point is that actually Kabila bowed out from the pressure, from basically creating his own constitution and running again. It is important for AU to be behind Tshisekedi and support him to create a coalition government and put something that almost resembles sense and begin to redevelop this country. This country has been raped from King Leopold to where we are now.
before the elections, he gave a number of interviews. One was with BBC, and he was saying the reason we are delaying these elections is because we want to have perfect elections. The reason why the international community was barred and denied access to the, for observation, it was to say we want to protect our own sovereignty, because every time they come here, they behave almost like masters of the place, and they dictate their rules and so on and so forth. So all of these are simply to say that if the notion of sovereignty has to weigh in terms of deciding, choosing about the leaders and the future, that sovereignty should not be bestowed onto one person who can substitute his will to the expression, the will of the people through the polls. So this is something that scholars, the international community, and people who are capable of weighing on the Congolese situation should be stressing and emphasizing, because what Africa needs the most is good institutions, not strong men. I think when Obama visited Africa, he was, emphasizing that message. And why? Because this is my understanding actually of democracy. Most of the people you talk with, or the average people, will tell you that Africa is not ready for democracy. Simply because the image of democracy we've seen is the street protest, is the vandalism, the looting and so on and so forth. But that is a very, very poor understanding of democracy. I think democracy should be understood as that institution which allows us to have a power sharing, like participation of the people through voting, elections, and everything else, but also the idea of justice, equality. Human beings have rights that are natural, and those rights should be protected and defended. And a democracy gives at least a platform where people can begin to enjoy those, rights, human rights. But also I see democracy, especially in the case of the Congo, because we're talking about Congo representing so much wealth that every other country and superpower out there are vying to say we can have access to them. For me, democracy is also giving the Congolese people the rights to own those resources and decide how they're going to use them. It is understandable that the Congolese people would have so much wealth in the Congo, and when you go across the country, you don't have paved roads, or you see the amount of poverty, which is really appalling. All of this is to say, and I like to refer to maybe, the Congo just received with another lady from Iraq, the Nobel Peace Prize for 2018. I don't know if you follow this. The recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. Denis Mukwege, was describing a situation in the Congo that is really unacceptable. In the past 10, 15, 20 years, more than 8 million people have been killed. But we're not talking about this. A government that has been in power for the last almost 20 years has not been able to curb, say, the violence, the rebel groups, everything that is dividing the country. And to claim that this government was elected massively at the level of, the MPs, it just beats all odds. I mean, no one can understand that. So there is this rigging which is taking place in the Congo, and to which the international community, the scholars and people should say we really need to stand with the people of the Congo, empower them, and at least, from here where we stand, how can we move forward in the next 5 years in trying to fix, a country that has been messed up. All right. So many powers. Oh, okay.
Maybe as we're ending up on it, we have this editorial cartoon by Gado, and we can weigh in briefly on it as well. So is Tshisekedi his own man, or is he a puppeteer of Joseph Kabila? Because we can see him there actually is actually in the pockets of Kabila. If you look at that particular cartoon, what would you say briefly? Dr. Hassan Kineje, then we'll come to you, Dr. Tuse, to wind up on that. Briefly.
Yeah, just a comment I wanted to make, if I a comment on this particular one. And what you have raised in there, just for the sake of the public, with regard to the foreign affairs, concluding that Washington had no role in the eventual fate of Lumumba. And to believe that is the same as believing that my dog had no role in the disappearance of the bone I just threw at it. Because it does not make sense. Now, all evidence and all the arguments and observations, and yet if we have actually to go with the recent analysis of the Congolese elections, even going by the opinion polls prior to election, it's unlikely that Tshisekedi was actually came out the victor. Well, if we have to follow science of politics, for instance. Now, there is, and he hasn't denied, they had talks with the government, with Kabila, before, actually. They were in discussions. Even the time when the election was postponed, there were discussions. First of all, we don't even know how those ballot boxes disappeared, were banned, all of a sudden. Stuff like that just don't happen, especially in African countries. It happens because someone actually wants it to happen. And because of this cloud of uncertainty and the unknowns, it is possible and plausible to believe that Kabila has a hand in the current presidency of the impending presidency of Tshisekedi, which will make him a puppet. Now, the interesting in Africa, though, is we've had presidents who've tried to succeed themselves before by picking someone or choosing a side they think is going to protect their interests until that side gets into power. And we've seen it in Zambia, we've seen it in Malawi, and sometimes they become their own man. So at this stage, we can say he's probably still a puppet, but there's a chance once he gets into power, power has a way of changing people, and he can easily become his own man. And if he actually wants to rule Congo the way he should as a leader, he has to be his own man and be able to create a broad and more inclusive government. Outside that, he's going to fail miserably.
All right. Let's hear from Dr. Mustafa, if you may just have that particular cartoon back so that we can weigh you on it. And we wind up on Congo, we move on to Zimbabwe. Briefly, is he his own man?
That
you all hold the
editorial cartoon is spot on. It's very clear that this man, Tshisekedi, is basically installed there, is put there by Joseph Kabila. If it's true, if we are to go by what happened, I believe the Catholic statistics and what international organizations, including SADC, it's very difficult that it's highly unlikely that this man won the elections. But that has happened, Debarl. Personally, I am skeptical about elections in such a fractious society in an African country. That has happened. We've had elections. The decent thing for Tshisekedi to do, as Ambassador Mwencha said, is they should have a government of national unity. It's impossible, or it's going to be rather difficult for Tshisekedi to actually govern the whole of DR Congo. And so the best way is to call everybody to the table. Congo is in such a state that no one party, no one man or government will be able to pull things together. We have to give Congo, the leaders, they have to give Congo the next 10 to 15 years to put that country back on track. What we should ask the international community, especially Belgium and other countries in the West, is to assist financially. Congo is, yes, it is bankrupt. It's become a basket case, but it has the minerals and it can pull itself up. Those countries should actually pay reparations and should pay for the mess and the sins that they did in Congo to help restart that particular country. And Congolese can build that country with the help of the African leaders, African Union, and its neighbors.
All right. Erasmus Mwencha.
Just a quick comment on that, and a little bit of history. If you look at the Laurent Kabila's assumption of power, he was actually assisted by regional powers. Literally, Ugandan forces, Rwandese forces, and others, Angolan forces, that joined hands to drive out Mobutu. And immediately he was sworn in as head of state, these powers disagreed on how Congo should move forward. They disagreed mainly because Laurent Kabila was then busy signing contracts with all these Western powers who came in with contracts to have mineral exploitation. In fact, his death remains a mystery, whether he was assassinated by external forces or in the palace itself, because that's where he died. Incidentally, that's where I was sworn in the State House as Secretary General in 1998. And in that meeting itself, you could see leaders disagreeing on the table on how, DR Congo would move forward. But here we are. Election has taken place, flawed as it is. Now you have the Supreme Court that has announced, the Constitutional Court, that Tshisekedi is elected. I think our effort should be, Congo has been in a crisis for over 60 years. Should it continue in that crisis? I think for heaven's sake, and for the people of Congo, let us see, even if it's in his pocket, I've seen leaders, and one can give numerous examples, who are elected in the pocket of an outgoing leader, but once they assume office, they become their own persons. And who knows? So let's give a chance for Congo to be able to move out of this crisis.
All right. Finally, Professor Nomidamba.
Debarl, I concur with my colleagues, and we have to move ahead. And Congo need to have its own distinction and its own room to grow. And the neighbors who have gone in one way or another to fight for their own interests need to pull out so that the Congo people can reorganize their business and be able to manage that country.
All right. I wanted you to comment on the cartoon, if I may just put it back so that you can actually weigh in on it. This particular editorial cartoon that we had earlier, let me try and just put it full screen so you can see it. There you go.
Okay, so just a quick word on the cartoon. I think I had a chance to discuss with many Congolese people on the ground about the whole situation, and I will just refer to one comment I received, from one person in Kinshasa, using the Bible to read the situation, and reminding me that even Jacob stole the blessing of his brother Isaiah, and God allowed it to happen, and from that stolen blessing, the nation of Israel came into being. So people should not be pessimistic, because whatever we are living through now could be the beginning of something new. And so I want also to agree with what has been said before, that for the time being, there is for sure a deal that has allowed Tshisekedi to become president instead of the elected president by the people. But given that the Constitutional Court has issued the final word, it is time for sure to begin to think about the next 5 years and move on. So from there, maybe Tshisekedi will grow to become his own man, as people are saying. But for the time being, for sure, his powers are very, very, very limited. In the sense that he doesn't have the majority in the parliament, he does not control the Senate, even the military. Someone was reminding me that this is a guy who lived, for instance, in Belgium for 38 years. So how much imbibed of the Congolese realities he has. His professional his professional experiences are very close to almost nothing. So let's hope that maybe, with good advisors around himself, and if he wants to bring in some other, big shots from the Congolese politics, he will be able to really reconcile the country.
So you think he's been acculturated to the Belgium's philosophy, so now putting him back in Congo. that is countermanding what actually they're trying to get Congo out of all those philosophies. You think so?
Well, not necessarily incarcerated to the Belgian, politics or culture.
Yes.
But simply that he seems to be an element, falling from nowhere in order to reconcile this messiness of the Congolese politics, because there are some people who were really barred from even vying for the position of president.
Yes.
Given their history, their past, and the kind of anger maybe that they could bring to the table. Okay. But I think Mustafa wanted to say something.
Well, I was just going to say that he either, Tshisekedi has a choice to make. He either becomes King Leopold III or Patrice Lumumba II.
All right. Can we just wind up on that, because it was actually finally to say that I had to win, but I can see also know, Midamba, you have something. Not lengthy, I hope.
Debarl, you don't have to be in Africa or overseas to think any different. You have to read Ngugi wa Thiong'o's book,
Yes.
Decolonizing the Mind.
Yes.
There are people who go on to school here, who live here, and their minds are not in Africa.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Noah Midamba. I just want also to bring to your attention this particular editorial cartoon that we have today and just discuss Zimbabwe politics a bit, where we know that the Human Rights Commission, that is Zimbabwe's Human Rights Commission, has said that security forces instigated systemic torture of residents following violent protests that erupted last week, sparked by a steep hike in the price of fuel. The comments reinforce concerns that Zimbabwe is reverting to the authoritarian rule that characterized the regime of former leader Robert Mugabe, who was forced from power after a coup in November 2017 that ended nearly 4 decades of his rule. And we just want to discuss this with our panelists as we're winding up. We begin with you, Dr. Hassan Khanenje. You think this is a false start for President Emmerson Mnangagwa? We thought that now that he's come to power, he will decouple from, you know, that face that we had of Robert Mugabe. But it seems people down the ground are not seeing any difference from what Robert Mugabe espoused.
You know, if you're a Siamese twin, you exactly can't decouple from the other person on your own. We know that President Mnangagwa was President Mugabe's right-hand man for 37 years. So there are certain old habits are going to die hard. However, this is expected. I think when he came into power, there was an expectation of goodwill from the international community that's going to bring investment. You know, as long as citizens are not getting the basic needs, their patience can only last for so long. And that hasn't happened a lot in Zimbabwe. Now, the country does not exactly have an alternative. I had a chance late last year and spent some time with the defense minister of Zimbabwe, in Zimbabwe actually, and to the command of Zimbabwe Defense Forces. The alternative that exists is not an alternative that a lot of Zimbabweans actually believe in. This young man who leads the opposition, there is a perception, even for some people who voted for him, that he's a Western stooge. And that thing is still very powerful in Zimbabwe. But the international community has been reluctant, especially the West, to open up the investment pockets and, you know, keep money flowing. And that has affected the recovery of Zimbabwe generally. Recently, of course, you've seen a move by the Zimbabwean government to compensate some white farmers, perhaps as a signal that, well, we respect private property and stuff like that. But it's too little in terms of substance and in terms of the impact. Now, I expect President Mnangagwa to face some challenges now, unless he comes with something a lot more radical that's also going to actually displease some of his supporters. Yes. With regard to ensuring that, well, if you're an international person, if you had invested here, your business are protected. You know, they have currency issues to fix, they have agriculture issues to fix, they have, you know, political issues to fix. He has to move more decisively. Now, it's going to be tough, especially in part, you know, coming from personal rule of the Brother Bob Mugabe of many, many years. It's going to take at least a minimum of about 5 years to actually consciously do that now. The challenge also with him is he's cut from the old cloth. And so I just don't know how much he's willing to bring about radical changes in Zimbabwe at this stage.
All right, let's hear from Erastus Mwencha.
I think there are 3 pillars that one to look at in the case of Zimbabwe.
Can we take just one because of interest of time?
Okay.
Yes, please.
And that is the pillar of economy and elections. The economy of Zimbabwe is hurting. I happen to be going there from time to time, and I know that, you know, their currency now that they use in the country is US dollar, and that is scarce. And so it has become very difficult to import the essential commodities to be able to run the economy. And so the people are really hurting. And once people are hurting, the politics become secondary, because at the end of the day, you are queuing to get your petrol, you cannot go to the hospital, everybody is demanding dollars for payment of all basic services, even buying a piece of bread. And so the economy is literally grinding to a halt. And so what the international community, as Hassan has said, needed to do after the election, I think, to me, it would appear the international community did not accept the election. And because they did not accept the election, they kept their checkbooks away. And that is hurting, and that's why you can see the president is moving around South Africa, to Russia, to Europe, mobilizing resources. But the situation at home is also compelling him to be there. And so I think the way out is now for President Mnangagwa to call a broad-based conference, have all the people hands on the deck so that the country can emerge as unity. That's the wisdom we saw in this country.
Thank you.
That when the president saw that the country is divided, he called people, and that's the peace we are enjoying and moving forward is because of that leadership.
Thank you.
He has to lead.
Right, he has to. Professor Nomidama, briefly.
Debarl, when Sir Winston Churchill was faced with the situation bombarding British Empire down to its knee, I called for people for their sweat and sacrifice. Abraham Lincoln faced a situation where the country was coming unglued and a sacrifice with his own life. Emerson Mnangagwa got to be an extraordinary leader. He has to come out of his cocoon from Robert Mugabe, be his own person and mobilize the people and demonstrate that they have to sweat and sacrifice. There is no extra, there is nothing. The youth are becoming unsettled. The Zimbabwe people expect more, but there's no more. There's no extra. And so if he cannot do that, then it's going to be miserable failure.
Thank you. Right. Lastly, let's hear from Dr. Tushai.
Well, I will just simply say, quickly that Zimbabwe needs to rebuild, the confidence in the government, which is missing, really. I was in Harare last month. I'm sure people also read in the newspapers recently the money stolen from Mugabe's house, like $100,000 US. And we can begin even to ask ourselves how many other, powerful men from the old regime may have their own banks, under the mattress, in their homes. So if all of this money could go back into the banks, maybe that could help the country begin to, reconstruct. But what I want to say is simply that you feel a kind of divide within the Zimbabwean society, where you have one side of the Zimbabweans, there is really a financial drought. There is nothing, no money. The business activities are really very slow. But when you cross across, say you go to Borodale, you see a semblance of, lively economy. Everything is going on very well. So that divide is something that needs to be, addressed to some extent, and just recreate the confidence that banks, institutions, the government needs to rebuild so that people can begin to work together.
Thank you very much. I want to thank your panelists this morning for that engaging discussion on matters foreign affairs, looking at Congo and Zimbabwe, and also the politics of the day here in the country. And lastly, as I'm winding up, I just want to remind you that one of our panelists, that is Peter Biara Jack, is still in prison. This is going to 6 months now. And come next Monday, there will be a filing of petition at the United Nations Security Council. That is the 28th, next Monday. He's really lost a lot of weight, but his spirit is still high. And we do hope and pray that he will, of course, this particular petition will make sure Peter is coming out of his slumbers as well. He's one of our regular panelists here from South Sudan, and he's in detention right now without any trial so far, and he's going down to 6 months so far. So next Monday we'll give you full details of this as well. But nonetheless, I want to thank you for all your participation. I can see a lot of tweets here also. As we're winding up, we're out of time, but the conversation continues online. You've been watching Standing Guard. Living with Us is up next. Thank you. My name is Debarl Inea.